applications that enable users to create and share content. That's not it. They're missing the point. Take the two words and look at their definitions. The definition of social: relating to or involving activities in which people spend time talking to each other. To each other. Medium: a medium of cultivation, conveyance, or expression. Social media is, and again, we'll take time on this one, a social media. It's revolutionary in person-to-person communication. No doubt. I would be a moron to tell you it isn't. I'm on Twitter too, right? But when the brands get involved, by definition, they're not welcome. It's a social media for people. Brands aren't welcome. So that prompts a very interesting question if you're a Canadian marketer or agency. How many brands does a Canadian actively follow on social media? And it's a question that I don't know the answer to, and probably you don't either, because it's a question that we can't show you because it would dispel everything. Every statistic I've shown you so far is true, and you've never seen it before because it's scarily, shittily bad. And it doesn't fit the agenda or the propaganda that's been parlayed to you for the last 8 years. We can't show that, because if we even glimpsed what it was, it would break the myth. Here's the best I could find after about 7 days of trying to find this stuff out. So there's a bit of data here from Asking Canadians, which I think is some kind of online research site. Bit of data here. So what is brands and social media? So the first one we've got here is, we know that 64% of social media users have taken action to stay up to date with a brand via social media. 64% sounds pretty good, right? Except it's look out for this data. It's filled with horseshit. First of all, look at that. Canadians following brands. So this is of the 64% that are already in that minority group of following a brand. We've already gone into the smaller slice of the pie. And second, look at the metric. 64% of people at any point in the last 8-9 years have once updated. Once. It's a very low bar. Tells us nothing. So let's try something else. Over here, this looks better. 2/3 of brand followers follow 5+ brands. That sounds pretty good. 2/3. But again, that's 2/3 of brand followers. They already follow at least one brand. I need to know the zero number, and you're not telling me that, right? So maybe we'll go down here to this bit. 1/3 of followers are just looking for, 1/3 of followers are not just looking for a deal or contest, they want a dialogue with the brand. Now, two things here. First, how about the 2/3 of followers who are just looking for a deal? And also, just because I'm not just looking for a deal, doesn't mean I'm looking for a dialogue. That's a huge leap, right? Finally, 1/4 of followers are open to receiving marketing messages through social media channels. Wow, that's awesome. Why don't we talk about the 3/4 who aren't open to any marketing messages, of the tiny group that are actually following brands in the first place? Look at the data. Look at this data. It's not right. So I don't know. I can't tell you the answer for Canada. I spent a lot longer in Australia, and I can give you the data from Australia because someone, unfortunately, accidentally discovered it and then tried to hide it in the footnotes of the paper, but I was able to dig it out. Experian did research at the end of last year on Australians. I'll bet you it ain't no different from Canada. 2/3 of Australians are not actively following any brands on social media. 2/3 of your customers don't follow any brands. Not just you, any brand. Of the third that do, 83% follow less than 7 brands. Less than 7 brands. Think how many are out there trying to get them. Less than 7. So you add all this data together. The average consumer in Australia is targeted, we think, by about 13,000 brands a year. Most of them also trying through social media. And 94% of those consumers average less than 1 brand on social media. Huh? It doesn't make sense. And yet, through this era, while you're laughing, you're also spending your money on social media. The joke is definitely on you. We spend more and more on this, despite the fact that the data would appear not to support it. The data from eMarketer suggests that approximately 20% more will be spent next year on social than on this year. It's been going up by approximately 20% each year. You're spending more. And we see the same picture. Now, this is North American data, so there is some Canadian data here, but it's diluted by your southern neighbors. But we see this picture over and over again. This is a survey at the end of 2014 of marketers, okay? And what you see here is, do you agree with the statement that I see return on investment from my social media? And you got 7% strongly agreeing and 30% agreeing. And then the other question, to the same sample, what are your future plans for social media? Oh, shit, I'm going to spend a lot more on it next year. I can't wait to get my money in there, right? This picture is troubling, is it not? On the left-hand side, 2/3 of these marketers are unsure of ROI. On the right-hand side, 2/3 of them are going to spend more on it next year. Now, I'll be generous and assume there's a third of them that have seen ROI and are spending more. The other 33%, I'd fire them. I'm not just a professor. I work for lots of large companies. I work at a senior level. If I met a marketer that was spending more on something they couldn't show me ROI from, I know my recommendation to my boss. Why spend more on something that you know or you're not sure is actually working? I'd like to answer that question, but I'd like to rephrase the question first. And I'd like to rephrase it by asking a different question. And the question is, why does my dog kill wallabies even though I tell her not to? Now, I apologize for those of you not familiar with Australian indigenous marsupials. A wallaby is a small, cute kangaroo. And where I live down in the south of Australia, we have a lot of them. And unfortunately, my dog has a penchant for wallaby and kills them a lot, okay? And nothing ruins a good dinner party than your dog padding in with the head of a dead wallaby. So I have spent 3 years in my free time out on the garden lawn training Asia, my dog, not to do this, with absolutely no success at all. So why does my dog keep killing wallabies? Let me tell you a bit about my dog. My dog's a beautiful girl. Her name is Asia. Like all good people, I got her from a dog pound. I didn't take a breeder's dog. I went to the dog pound and I found a dog. And she was a pup, an orphan pup that found her in a plastic bag. And she was a beautiful little 4-week-old girl. Look at her. And she's clearly got, she's Labrador. And I said to the owner of the dog's home, I said, so, what is she? He said, well, she's some kind of lab cross. So we fed her and we got her healthy and we looked after her and she grew into a big, strong dog. And this is Asia today. Now, you may not be familiar with Australia, but let me share with you that clearly there is a lot of Labrador in my dog. But there's also a lot of something else. And that something else is dingo. In fact, if I had to guess, I think she's about 95% dingo. With a small smidge of Labrador around the edges. Now, the good news is I don't have to feed her anymore, right? She looks after herself. The answer to the question, why does she chase wallabies, should be obvious. Why does she chase wallabies? It's in her nature. Why do marketers keep spending more on social media? Because it's in your nature. You are, and Bob talked about it earlier, the magpie profession. You like new things. Shiny, shiny. If I invented a new social media tool this afternoon called Thwacko, a third of you would be asking whether you could invest in it by the end of the day. You're also very paranoid about being left out. The older a marketer gets, the more insecure they are, the more they're worried. Shit, if I don't invest in this stuff, it'll look like I'm old and they'll fire me. So let me explain to you why I think marketers all over the world and here in Canada have spent too much on social media. I'm not saying they should spend something, but too much and talk about it too much. And I have to use my favorite professor, a guy called Solomon Asch, who's a very famous behavioral psychologist from the 20th century. And Asch was famous for doing what were called conformity experiments, showing the hidden rules inside society. And famously, one of his experiments was repeated by candid camera. And here I think we have the answer to why are marketers spending too much money on social media.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear, and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
I think we're doing it because we're afraid not to do it. And it's a natural feeling, but one we have to fight against. Now, to be fair, first of all, to Facebook, Facebook has changed. When Mark Zuckerberg was launching Facebook nearly 10 years ago, it was a much more disruptive sell. He said back then, the way to advertise in the old days was to get into the mass media and push out your content. That was the last 100 years. In the next 100 years, information won't just be pushed out to people, it will be shared among the millions of connections people have. Advertising will change. This was that bullshit about conversations and dialogue and community and all that stuff that we all believed in. You jump forward to today, and we move away from social ads, and the Zuckerberg of today is running a much stronger, much more successful organization, and they don't talk anymore about that conversational bullshit. Only companies do. Only agencies do. Facebook now talks like any other agency. You know what they just launched, as you probably know, for their video, online video? TRPs, measured by Nielsen. Sound familiar? They've become a very successful, very vibrant display media. It's advertising in a different form of media. It's just advertising. Same story at Twitter. They've got a new offer, which is the promoted moment. What is it? It's a little display ad at the bottom of your Twitter feed. It's just advertising. No more conversations, none of that bullshit. They're making a very good business at Facebook and a so-so business at Twitter selling ads. It's fine. It's a good business. And if we look at the projections for the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see, according to The Economist and Zenith Optomedia, that this green bar, which is what they call internet advertising globally, will continue to grow, along with the rest of the pie a little bit. And if we break that down and you look at, for 2016, what that means for the internet stuff, for digital stuff, you'll see that most of it is still paid search. Don't forget that, some display and classified. And then we have online video and social media spending here. It's a significant part of the internet spend, which is a significant part of the overall spend. If you actually look at the overall numbers,